AITA for walking out of couples therapy, hiring a lawyer, and refusing to talk to my wife's family without everything in writing. I didn't think a couch and a box of tissues could feel like a courtroom, but that's what it turned into. At first, it was just therapy. Then it became a file. Then it became a weapon. And now I'm sitting alone in my apartment with a legal pad on my coffee table, replaying the last 6 months like a slow-motion car wreck, trying to figure out whether I'm the villain in my own story or the only person who noticed a trap before it snapped shut. My name is Mark, and I used to believe that if you love someone, you could talk your way through anything. I've been married to my wife, Emily, for 8 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, who is the kind of kid who asks big questions at bedtime and then falls asleep mid-sentence with her hand still holding yours. Emily and I weren't a fairy tale, but we weren't a disaster either. We were normal. Mortgage, school pickup, work calendars, the endless loop of laundry that somehow multiplies when you turn your back. The trouble didn't start with a betrayal or a dramatic secret. It started with exhaustion and small resentments. Those stupid little splinters you ignore until your whole hand is infected. Emily would say I was checked out. I'd say she was controlling. She'd plan our weekends down to the hour, then get angry if I didn't look happy enough about it. I'd come home late from work and try to decompress, and she'd interpret my silence as an attack. We'd argue about dishes like they were moral failings. We'd argue about Sophie's screen time like it was a referendum on who loved her more. Then one night, after Sophie went to bed, Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table with her phone face down like she'd rehearsed the pose. "I want us to do couples therapy," she said. I remember feeling relief. Actual relief. Like, thank God, an adult solution. I'd grown up in a house where people slammed doors and didn't talk for days. I'd promised myself I'd never live like that. Therapy sounded like a bridge. "Okay," I said. "Sure. Let's find someone." Emily's face softened, but only for a second. Then she slid her phone toward me like evidence. "I already found someone," she said. "Her name is Dr. Karen Holt." I stared at the screen. A smiling headshot. A list of credentials. A pastel website with words like safe space and healing. "I thought we'd pick together," I said, still calm. Emily's voice got that careful brightness she used when she wanted something badly, but didn't want to admit it. I did research. She specializes in couples and family dynamics. "She's perfect for us." "Great," I said. "Let me look her up. Maybe we can talk to a few therapists and see." "No," Emily said. Just like that. One syllable, flat. "I'm only doing therapy if it's with her." I remember blinking like I'd misheard. "Only with her?" "Yes," she said. "I trust her. And if you're serious about saving this marriage, you'll trust that." I should have stopped right there. I should have asked why trust mattered more than neutrality. I should have recognized that a boundary disguised as an ultimatum is still an ultimatum. But I wanted peace. I wanted to be the guy who didn't make everything harder. I also wanted Emily to feel heard, because she looked so raw when she said it, like therapy was her last rope, and she was holding it with bleeding hands. So I said yes. The first session was fine. Dr. Holt had a warm voice and a way of nodding that made you feel like whatever you said was reasonable. Her office smelled like citrus and something floral like a hotel lobby. There was a small fountain that gurgled softly like it was trying too hard to be calming. Emily sat upright, knees together, hands folded. I sat back, trying to look relaxed, trying not to feel like I was auditioning to be judged. Dr. Holt asked why we were there. Emily talked first. She talked about feeling alone in the marriage, about carrying the mental load, about how she never knew what mood I'd be in when I walked through the door. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't exaggerate. She was careful, almost polished, and that scared me more than anger would have. Then Dr. Holt turned to me. "Mark," I said the things I thought were true, that I loved my family, that I felt like nothing I did was ever enough, that I felt managed more than partnered, that I was tired too, and that sometimes when Emily wanted to talk, it didn't feel like a talk. It felt like a performance review. Dr. Holt nodded and said, "So you feel criticized?" Emily's eyes flicked toward me, just a quick glance, and then away again. She didn't look surprised. She looked confirmed. We went back every week. Dr. Holt gave us exercises active listening, I statements, gratitude lists. Emily did them like homework. I did them like chores. Still, I believe in the process. I told myself that discomfort was part of growth. Around the fourth session, Dr. Holt suggested individual check-ins. Sometimes, she said, it helps to understand each partner's personal history and triggers, so we can support the couple better. Emily immediately agreed. I hesitated because I'd done enough reading to know that couples therapy can get messy when the therapist becomes each person's individual confidant. But Dr. Holt framed it as brief, structured, in service of the marriage. It's not individual therapy, she said, smiling. It's just context. So I went first. It's strange how easily you can spill your insides when someone sits across from you and looks like they've been trained to hold your pain. Dr. Holt asked about my childhood, my parents' divorce, how my dad used to make me feel like love was conditional on performance, how I learned to stay quiet to avoid making things worse. She asked about my stress at work, and I admitted something I hadn't said out loud, that I've been having panic attacks in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel and waiting for my heartbeat to slow down before I walked into the office. She leaned forward and said, "Have you ever felt like you're walking on eggshells at home?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. Yeah, I said, a lot. Then she asked a question that felt like stepping on a thin ice. Have you ever worried Emily might try to keep Sophie from you if you separated? What? No. I don't know. I don't think so. But the question lodged in my chest. Because a part of me, the part that noticed patterns, the part that paid attention to how Emily could be charming and sharp in the same breath, whispered, maybe, I didn't say that. I said something safer. I said, Emily loves Sophie. She wouldn't. Dr. Holt nodded slowly, like she understood something I hadn't fully said. Sometimes people do things they never imagine when they feel threatened, she murmured. I left that session feeling wrung out, but oddly hopeful, like I'd handed over a knot and someone had promised to untie it. 2 days later, Emily's mother called me. I've never been close with my in-laws. They're not monsters. They're just a unit. Emily's parents and her older sister, Rachel, have a way of speaking that feels coordinated, like they've already agreed on the script before they pick up the phone. Still, a call from her mom wasn't unusual. She'd ask about Sophie or remind me about a family birthday dinner. This time, her tone was different. Softer. Concerned. Mark, she said, I wanted to check on you. I paused. I'm Fina. What? There was a tiny silence, like she was choosing her words from a list. Emily said you've been struggling, that you've been having anxiety. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told Emily about the panic attacks. Not in detail. Not like that. And the way her mother said it, like it was already a known fact in the family, made my skin go cold. I'm okay, I said carefully. It's just stress. I understand, she said. But you know Sophie needs stability. Emily is doing everything she can. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Why are we talking about stability? Oh, honey, she said. And that word, honey, landed wrong. I'm not attacking you. I just want what's best for Sophie. And sometimes when someone is overwhelmed, it can affect the children. I ended the call quickly. I told myself it was nothing. Emily could have mentioned anxiety in passing. Her mother could be overreacting. Families talk. Therapy encourages openness. It didn't have to mean anything. But then it happened again and again. At a Sunday dinner, Emily's sister pulled me aside while Emily was in the kitchen. Rachel's smile was bright and hard. I heard you've been feeling criticized, she said, like she was quoting a headline. Who told you that? She shrugged. Emily worries about you. That word again. Worries. Like I was the problem to be managed. Another time, Emily's dad made a joke about me being sensitive. He laughed, but his eyes watched my reaction like he was testing something. The weirdest moment was when Emily's mom mentioned my childhood. I'm so sorry your father was emotionally distant, she said over dessert, like she was offering condolences for a funeral I hadn't invited her to. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I hadn't told anyone in that family about my dad. Not the details. Not the stuff I'd said in Dr. Holt's office, voice low, eyes burning, because I didn't want to sound pathetic. I looked at Emily. She met my eyes for a second and then looked away, like she couldn't bear the intensity. That night, after we put Sophie to bed, I asked Emily directly, "Have you been telling your family what I say in therapy?" Emily's face tightened instantly, like I'd accused her of cheating. "No." "Then how do they know about my dad?" I asked. My voice stayed calm, but my hand was shaking. Emily crossed her arms. "I might have mentioned that you have some unresolved issues from childhood." Unresolved issues. I repeated and heard how it sounded, like I was broken furniture. "I didn't give details," she snapped. "Stop making me the villain for trying to get support." "I didn't say you were a villain," I said. "I'm asking how your mom knew my dad was emotionally distant." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. "Maybe you said something at dinner once," she said finally. I knew that was a lie. Not because I had proof, but because I knew my own habits. I don't share easily. I barely share with my friends. The idea that I'd casually told her family about my father's emotional neglect over mashed potatoes was absurd. When I brought it up in our next couple session, Dr. Holt's expression didn't change, but the air in the room did. "I'm noticing you feel unsafe," she said to me. "Yes," I said, "because things I say here are somehow making their way to Emily's family." Emily's eyes flashed. "That's not fair." Dr. Holt held up a hand in a gentle, stop the conflict gesture. "Mark, can you give me an example?" I gave her the examples. The anxiety comment, the sensitivity joke, the line about my father. Dr. Holt nodded slowly and said, "Emily, do you talk to your family about what's happening in your marriage?" Emily hesitated just for a breath. "Sometimes," she admitted. "And do you share things Mark has disclosed?" Dr. Holt asked. Emily's chin lifted. "Not like that." Dr. Holt turned to me again. "Mark, it's important to remember that therapy isn't a vault. We encourage transparency and family systems often." "A vault?" I repeated. "I'm not asking for secrecy from Emily about her feelings. I'm asking why my personal disclosures are becoming dinner conversation." Dr. Holt's smile was small, patient, like I was a child misunderstanding the rules of the game. "It may help to focus on why this feels threatening to you." I felt my face heat. "Because I feel exposed. And exposure can feel dangerous when you've experienced emotional distance and criticism," she said. There was again my dad, my triggers, my history placed neatly in front of me like a label. It was like she was saying, "This is not a problem with boundaries. This is your trauma reacting." I left that session with a new kind of nausea. After that, therapy shifted, subtle at first. Dr. Holt started framing our conflicts in terms of my avoidant tendencies. Emily would talk about feeling unsupported, and Dr. Holt would look at me and say, "So when Emily needs connection, you withdraw." It wasn't untrue exactly. Ida withdraw. But it became the only story we told in that room. Emily's control became anxiety. Her sharpness became hurt. My silence became a pattern that harms the relationship. One session, Emily complained that I'd forgotten to pack Sophie's lunch on the day I took her to school. "It was one time," I said. Emily's voice stayed calm. "It's not one time. It's a pattern. Sophie's needs get missed when Mark is responsible." Dr. Holt's pen moved across her notebook. "That's important," she murmured. Then she looked at me. "Mark, how do you respond to hearing that Sophie's needs may not be consistently met when you're in charge?" It felt like a trick question. If I defended myself, I was defensive. If I agreed, I was admitting incompetence. I respond by saying I made a mistake, and I corrected it. I said slowly, "Sophie had lunch. I brought it to school. She was fine." Emily sighed like she was tired of explaining gravity to a toddler. "But you didn't even notice until I texted you." Dr. Holt nodded. "So Emily carries the awareness." I stared at the fountain. I listened to the water gurgle, calm and constant, like it didn't care what was happening in the room. In my chest, something cold settled. Another session, Dr. Holt asked us to describe our strengths as parents. Emily said she was consistent, nurturing, organized. She talked about routines, doctor's appointments, school forms. She smiled softly when she said Sophie needed stability. It was my turn. I said I was patient, that I played with Sophie, that I listened to her questions, that I was the one who built blanket forts and read the same bedtime book 5 nights in a row because Sophie liked the voices. Dr. Holt tilted her head. "That's lovely," she said. "But I'm also hearing that your parenting is more recreational." Recreational, like I was a weekend activity. Like my value was entertainment. Emily didn't contradict her. I started noticing other things. The way Dr. Holt would ask Emily questions that gave her room to explain herself, and ask me questions that cornered me. The way Emily would arrive with notes, and Dr. Holt would praise her commitment. The way I'd arrive with my messy feelings and get told to regulate. Then came the moment I can't unhear. It was after a fight at home. A stupid fight, the kind that begins with a drop comment and ends with both people feeling unheard. Emily had accused me of gaslighting her because I didn't remember a conversation the way she did. I told her I wasn't gaslighting, I just didn't remember it. She said that was exactly what gaslighters say. We went to bed angry. In therapy, Emily described the fight. She used phrases I'd heard online. Emotional labor, weaponized incompetence, coercive control. She didn't shout. She didn't insult me directly. She just painted a picture where she was the exhausted, reliable parent, and I was the unpredictable man who made her feel unsafe. Then Dr. Holt turned to me and said, "Mark, do you understand how your behavior could be experienced as destabilizing for Sophie?" I blinked. For Sophie? We were arguing after she was asleep. And yet children absorb tension. Dr. Holt said gently. They sense instability, even if it's not directed at them. Emily's eyes glistened. That's what I've been saying. Dr. Holt nodded at Emily, then back to me. It may be important for us to consider what a safe environment looks like for Sophie if the marriage continues to be high conflict. The words sounded careful, but I heard what they implied. Safe environment. High conflict. Consider. It sounded like custody language without using the word custody. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it, because it changes what you're doing in that room. You stop trying to heal. You start trying not to be used. My mouth went dry. Are you saying what? I'm saying, Dr. Holt replied, still calm, that as parents, we have a responsibility to minimize harm. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Emily stared at her hands, but I could see the satisfaction in the set of her shoulders, like something had clicked into place. That night, I lay awake while Emily slept. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the last few weeks. The way her family suddenly treated me like a liability. The way Dr. Holt questions kept circling Sophie, stability, safety. The way my weaknesses were being documented, while Emily's were being reframed as stress responses. And I realized something that made my stomach twist. I was giving the material. Every time I admitted I was anxious, it became evidence that I was unstable. Every time I admitted I sometimes shut down, it became evidence that I was emotionally unavailable. Every time I admitted I felt overwhelmed, it became evidence that I couldn't handle parenting alone. I started paying attention to what I said. I became cautious. I answered questions like I was speaking to HR. And Dr. Holt noticed. "Mark," she said one session, "you seem guarded." I forced a smile. "I'm just thinking before I speak." "That could be a form of avoidance," she said. "Or it could be self-preservation," I thought. But I didn't say that. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Then I found the crack that turned my suspicion into certainty. It happened by accident. Emily left her laptop open on the dining table while she took Sophie to dance class. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was just clearing space to set down the mail when a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. An email preview. From Rachel, her sister. Subject, Dr. Holt said. I froze. My throat tightened. I stared at the screen like it might disappear if I blinked. I told myself I shouldn't. That this was a violation. That I could ask Emily directly. But my hands moved before my morals caught up. I clicked. The email thread was longer than I expected. Emily had been forwarding summaries of sessions to Rachel, sometimes in bullet points, sometimes with quotes. And there it was, a line that made my blood run cold. Dr. Holt agrees that Mark's anxiety could impact custody if he doesn't address it. She said documentation matters. Documentation matters. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I scrolled, heart pounding, and saw more. Rachel advising Emily to keep records. Emily responding that she was already doing it. Mentions of if it comes to that. Mentions of primary residence. Mentions of Sophie needs stability. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen, and everything inside me went very quiet. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just a rough patch in a marriage. This was planning. I closed the laptop like it was hot. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the sink and tried to ground myself in something normal. The smell of dish soap, the hum of the fridge. My hand shook anyway. When Emily came home, she was cheerful. She told me Sophie nailed her routine. She kissed me on the cheek like we were fine. Like she hadn't been collaborating with her sister and our therapist about documentation. I watched her for a long moment and realized I didn't know who she was anymore. Or maybe I did, and I just refused to see it. That night, after Sophie was asleep, I said, "We need to talk." Emily's smile faded instantly. "About what?" I kept my voice even. "About Dr. Holt." Emily's eyes narrowed. "What about her?" "I saw an email," I said. My stomach twisted as I admitted it. "From Rachel." The subject line said Dr. Holt said. Emily's face went pale, then flushed. "You went through my laptop?" "I saw a notification," I said. "I clicked it. I'm not proud of it. But now I know what's happening." Emily's voice rose. "You violated my privacy. And you violated mine first," I said quietly. Her mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about therapy being used as documentation," I said. "I'm talking about my disclosures being shared with your family. I'm talking about the therapist you insisted on being your family friend." Emily's eyes flicked away, just for a second. That was all I needed. "A family friend," I repeated. "How long have you known Dr. Holt?" Emily exhaled sharply, like I was being ridiculous. "Our families have known each other for years." "So what?" "She's a professional." "You didn't tell me," I said. "It didn't matter," she snapped. "You're doing it again, Mark. You're twisting things to make yourself the victim." I felt something inside me harden. "Did you pick her because you trusted her?" I asked. "Or because you trusted what she'd do with what I said?" Emily's eyes filled with tears instantly. Like a switch. "How can you say that?" "Because I read the email," I said. "Because Rachel wrote documentation matters. Because you wrote back that you're already keeping records." Emily covered her mouth with her hand and shook her head, like she was overwhelmed. "You're scaring me," she whispered. There it was again. The language. Scared. Unsafe. Stability. I stared at her and realized I was watching a performance I'd been participating in without knowing the script. I didn't shout. I didn't throw accusations. I just said, "I'm done with Dr. Holt." Emily's eyes widened. "You can't just quit. Therapy is the only thing keeping us." "Keeping us what?" I asked. "Married? Or keeping you ahead?" Emily's voice cracked. "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being careful." The next day, I called a lawyer. I didn't want to. I felt like doing it would make everything real. Like it would turn our marriage into paperwork. But the email already had. The moment custody entered the room, even indirectly, it stopped being a private relationship problem and became a legal risk. The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and toner. The attorney, a woman with calm eyes and a blunt voice, listened without interrupting while I explained everything. The therapy, the family friend, the sharing, the email. She didn't look shocked. She looked unsurprised. When I finished, she said, "Stop discussing anything sensitive with anyone connected to your wife. Stop therapy with that provider. Communicate in writing. Document your involvement with your child. Do not move out unless we plan it carefully." I nodded, stomach tight. "Am I overreacting?" She leaned forward. "Mark, you are reacting to a credible threat. You're not obligated to walk willingly into a narrative being built about you." Narrative. That word made my skin prickle because it was exactly what I felt like my life was being rewritten while I lived it. I went home and started doing something that felt both humiliating and necessary. I wrote down everything. Pickups, drop-offs, bedtime stories, meals I cooked, doctor visits I attended, days I took off work for Sophie. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just recorded reality because reality was the only thing I could still trust. Emily noticed the change immediately. When I spoke less, she called it stonewalling. When I asked for things in writing, she called it cold. When I refused to continue sessions with Dr. Holt, she told her family I was refusing help. And her family reacted exactly how you'd expect. Her mother sent me a long text about how families support each other, and how therapy only works if both people commit. Her father called and said, "You need to man up and stop acting like a victim." Rachel emailed me directly, which she'd never done before, and wrote, "Emily is afraid of you." Afraid of me. I read it 3 times because it felt like stepping into an alternate universe. I have never hit Emily. I have never threatened her. I've never even punched a wall. The worst thing I've done in our marriage is shut down during fights and go quiet, which I know can be hurtful, but it's not fear-worthy. And yet the word was out there now, hanging in the air like smoke. That was when I made the decision that everyone around me is calling unforgivable. I sent a single message to Emily and her family. No emotion, no insults, just boundaries. I wrote that all communication would be in writing going forward. That I would not discuss therapy or marriage issues with her family. That if Emily wanted to pursue couples counseling, it would need to be with a neutral, mutually agreed upon therapist, and only after we established clear confidentiality expectations. That I would not attend any more sessions with Dr. Holt. That I had retained counsel and would be following legal advice to protect myself and Sophie. Emily read it and stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're doing this," she whispered, voice shaking. "You're making this into a war." "No," I said quietly. "I'm refusing to be ambushed." Emily's tears came fast. "So now I can't even talk to my own family?" "You can talk to them," I said, "but I'm done feeding them information about me." Emily shook her head, crying harder. "You're trying to control me." The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. Almost. For the next week, the house felt like a museum after closing. Quiet. Careful. Emily moved around me like I was unpredictable. I moved around her like she was armed. Sophie, sweet Sophie, started asking why Mommy and Daddy weren't hugging. One night, after Sophie fell asleep, Emily sat across from me on the couch and said, "Do you even want this marriage?" I looked at her for a long time. I thought about the years we'd built, the vacations, the lazy Sundays, the way she used to laugh, really laugh, before everything became tense. I thought about how much I wanted to believe this was salvageable. Then I thought about the email. Documentation matters. "I wanted it," I said. "I don't know if I can want it now." Emily flinched like I'd punched her with words. "So you're giving up?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. "And what about me?" she snapped. The tears dried up fast, replaced by anger. What about how I felt? Alone? Like I'm parenting by myself? "You're not parenting by yourself," I said. "You're building a case like you are." Emily stood up abruptly. "You're unbelievable," she spat and walked away. A few days later, she told me she wanted a separation. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I said, "Okay." I said it because the decision had already been made in her mind, and because begging someone not to hurt you doesn't stop them from doing it. It just teaches them where to press. I moved into a small apartment 10 minutes away, close enough that Sophie's routine didn't have to change too much. I didn't do it impulsively. My attorney and I planned the timing and the logistics, so it couldn't be framed as abandonment. My lawyer helped me draft a temporary parenting schedule. Emily didn't like it. She wanted primary. She wanted me to have every other weekend. She said Sophie needed one home base. She said it in the same tone Dr. Holt used when she talked about stability. I requested 50-50. Emily's response was a text. "You're not thinking about Sophie. You're thinking about yourself." Maybe that's true. Maybe it's selfish to want equal time. But I think it's also selfish to assume you're the default parent just because you speak the language of therapy fluently. And that's where the guilt comes in, the part that's eating me alive and making me write this. Because from Emily's perspective, I'm the guy who quit therapy. I'm the guy who hired a lawyer. I'm the guy who suddenly got cold and demanded everything in writing. I'm the guy who refused to talk to her family, the people who have always rallied around her. I'm the guy who looked at a process meant to heal and treated it like an attack. But from my perspective, I woke up inside a story that wasn't mine, watched my own vulnerabilities get passed around like gossip, and realized the help I was receiving was being used to label me unstable. I keep replaying the moment Dr. Holt asked me if I'd ever worried Emily would keep Sophie from me. I keep wondering if that question was concern or a seed, a suggestion, a blueprint. Emily says I'm paranoid. Her family says I'm manipulative. Rachel told a mutual friend that I'm trying to silence Emily. Dr. Holt left me a voicemail, calm and warm, saying she was concerned about my abrupt disengagement and that avoidance can be harmful. I haven't called her back. Now I'm living in the space between certainty and grief. I'm brushing Sophie's hair in the morning when she stays with me, packing her little lunchbox carefully, making sure the zipper is all the way closed because I can't stand the idea of one small mistake being turned into a character trait. I'm reading bedtime stories slower than I used to because I'm trying to soak up every moment like it might be counted against me later. I'm writing emails instead of having conversations. I'm saving receipts, saving screenshots, saving my sanity in tiny, boring ways. And I hate it. I hate that I'm doing this. I hate that I'm thinking like this. I hate that my marriage turned into evidence. But I also can't ignore what I saw. So that's where I am. Therapy that became a weapon. Trust that unspooled one thread at a time until the whole fabric tore. A child in the middle who deserves parents who aren't trying to win. The first week in the apartment felt like I was pretending to be a person. Not in the dramatic way. No sobbing on the floor. No bottles lined up on the counter. Just this constant sensation that I'd stepped slightly outside my own body and was watching Mark do Mark things from a few feet above his head. Wake up. Make coffee. Check my phone. Reread Emily's last text like maybe the words will change if I stare hard enough. Open my laptop. Work. Pretend my hands aren't shaking when I type. Then Sophie would arrive with her little backpack and her mismatched socks and her bright, unbothered faith that adults are stable planets she can orbit. And for a few hours, I could almost breathe. Until the next message came. Another line from Emily. Another, we need to talk. Another, this isn't good for Sophie. Another, why are you making everything legal? Every time she used Sophie's name in a sentence that started with for her sake, my brain flashed to that email. Documentation matters. I started to realize I wasn't just fighting Emily. I was fighting the story that had already been drafted. It showed up in the smallest things. Emily would send me a scheduling text that looked normal on the surface. Sophie has a dentist appointment next Thursday at 3. I'll take her. And if I replied, I can take her, she would respond. No, it's fine. You have work. She needs consistency. Or, I already told her I'm taking her. She'll be upset if it changes. On its face, that's considerate. But after enough times, it felt like she was collecting a pattern. Emily handles appointments. Mark can't. The first time it happened, I let it go. The fifth time, it felt intentional. So, I started replying differently. Thanks for the heads up. I can take her if you'd like. If you prefer to take her, please send the provider name and address so I can have it on my calendar too. Not emotional. Not accusatory, just a paper trail that I was willing and involved. Emily didn't like that. You could tell because her messages got sharper. Why are you talking like a robot? You're acting like I'm your enemy. This is exactly why therapy was needed. I would stare at my phone and wonder if this was what manipulation looked like in modern adulthood. No screaming, no slamming doors. Just a steady drip of language that made you feel unreasonable for wanting basic boundaries. A few days after I moved out, I got a call from Dr. Holt. I almost didn't answer. The number came up as private, which made my skin prickle. But there's a part of me, maybe the part that still wanted this to be a misunderstanding, that thought, if I ignore her, that becomes another narrative. So I picked up. Mark. Her voice was gentle, the same tone she used when she was about to reframe your reality. I'm glad you answered. What do you want? I asked, and immediately regretted how harsh it sounded. I want to check in, she said. Your abrupt disengagement from therapy concerned me. Emily is distressed. This level of conflict can be harmful for Sophie. There it was. Sophie. Harm. The familiar vocabulary that made my heart rate jump. I'm not continuing therapy with you, I said. Please don't contact me again. A pause. The tiniest pause. Mark, she said. Is there someone advising you? A lawyer, perhaps? My chest tightened. That's none of your business. I'm asking because sometimes people in heightened states can be influenced by outside voices, she said, and avoidance tends to escalate. I'm not in a heightened state, I said, my voice low. I'm in a protective state. She made a soft sound, like sympathy. I hear that, but you have to understand how this looks. How this looks. That phrase hit me like a slap, because it wasn't about truth. It was about optics, narrative, story. Exactly, I said. And that's why we're done. Mark, she continued, if you're worried about confidentiality, we can discuss. No, I cut in. You should have discussed it before my private disclosures ended up with my in-laws. Silence again. Then, very smoothly, Emily's family is part of her support system. And I'm not, I said. Right? That's not what I said. But that's what you've been practicing, I replied. Goodbye. I hung up. My hand was shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. And then I sat on my couch and just stared at the blank TV screen, the way you stare at a closed door after you've locked it and you're waiting to see if someone will try the handle. Kids are terrifyingly perceptive, and Sophie is no exception. The first time she noticed, it was small. She was coloring at my kitchen table. My apartment had a table, but it was cheap and wobbly, like it was aware of its own temporary nature. She drew a picture of our old house, the front door, the window, a sun in the corner with a smile. Then she drew me, then Emily, then herself. Then she paused and drew 2 houses. One with me inside, one with Emily inside. Why do we have 2 houses now? She asked, as if she were asking why people have 2 shoes. I swallowed. Mommy and Daddy are taking some space right now, I said. We both love you. That doesn't change. She nodded like she accepted it, then hit me with the kind of question only kids ask because they haven't learned that adults lie. Did you make Mommy sad? My throat burned. Sometimes adults make each other sad, I said carefully. But it's not your job to fix it. She looked down at her drawing. Mommy said you're mad at her. I felt my stomach drop. Did she? I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Sophie shrugged. She said you don't want to talk to Grandma anymore. There it was. The family system. The framing. Even Sophie was getting the edited version. Daddy is shutting people out. I didn't correct Sophie directly. I didn't say, Mommy is building a case. You don't poison a child against the other parent, even when you're terrified. I just said, I'm not mad at Mommy. I'm trying to make sure we talk in a way that stays calm. Sophie accepted that. Then she asked if we could make grilled cheese. So we did. And I hated the fact that I had to measure every word with my daughter now, because I didn't know what might come back through Emily's family like a boomerang. Emily asked me to come over to the old house to talk like adults. She used that phrase twice. Can you come by after Sophie goes to bed? We should talk like adults. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who replied, essentially, no. If you meet, it should be in a public place, and ideally written communication only. So I suggested we talk by phone. Emily refused. Phone calls can be misinterpreted. Just come over. The irony nearly made me choke. I said I wasn't comfortable meeting alone and asked if she would put what she wanted to discuss in writing. Emily's response came fast. This is insane. You're acting like I'm dangerous. Then, if you don't come over, I'll assume you're refusing to co-parent. That was the first time she tied my refusal to her conclusion. If I didn't comply, she'd label it. Refusing to co-parent. Uncooperative. Absent. Avoidant. And I realized something. Boundaries weren't just boundaries anymore. In this new environment, every boundary I set could be portrayed as aggression. So I replied calmly, I'm not refusing to co-parent. I'm happy to discuss parenting matters in writing. For non-urgent topics, please email. For urgent child-related matters, text is fine. It was the most reasonable message I've ever sent. It also felt like signing a contract with someone who kept moving the ink. Emily didn't reply for a full day. Then her mother texted me. Her mom's message was long enough that my phone screen looked like it was sweating. Mark, this isn't you. We're all worried about you. Emily is exhausted and scared. Sophie needs stability. You can't just cut off family. If you keep doing this, you're going to destroy what's left. Please stop listening to whoever is filling your head. I stared at it for a long time. The phrases were almost identical to Dr. Holt's. Worried, scared, stability, influenced by outside voices. It wasn't just Emily. It was the whole unit speaking through different mouths. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and sent it to my lawyer. Then Rachel texted me too. If you cared about Sophie, you'd stop trying to control Emily with legal threats. Legal threats. I hadn't threatened anyone. I hadn't even mentioned custody to Emily directly. I just established boundaries. And yet, suddenly I was the aggressor. That night, I drafted a message to all of them. I rewrote it 10 times. The first draft was angry. The second was defensive. The third was pleading. Eventually, I landed on something cold and clean. I'm not discussing marriage issues with anyone besides Emily. Please do not contact me about our relationship. If you need to communicate about Sophie, do so through Emily. Thank you. I sent it, and I knew the moment I hit send that it would be used against me as isolation or hostility. But I also knew that if I didn't shut the channel, they would keep flooding it until I drowned. 2 weeks later, Emily emailed me. An actual email, not a text, which felt like she'd decided to fight on my chosen battlefield. She wrote that she'd found a new couples therapist and that we had an appointment scheduled for the next Tuesday at 6 p.m. She included a Zoom link, as if that settled it. I replied, "Thank you. Please send the therapist's full name and practice info. I'm open to therapy with a mutually agreed provider after we confirm neutrality and confidentiality expectations." Emily responded, "Neutrality is your excuse to avoid accountability." I stared at that sentence for a full minute. Because it contained the whole pattern in miniature, my boundary was reframed as a character flaw. I asked my lawyer to look up the therapist. Turns out the new one was in the same professional circle as Dr. Holt. Not a direct connection I could prove, but enough that my lawyer raised an eyebrow and said, "Interesting." So I suggested we use a therapist from a different network, someone neither of us had any ties to. Emily's reply, "I'm not doing this endless search. Either you show up or you're refusing again." Refusing again. There's something uniquely maddening about being told you're refusing when you're offering alternatives. At that point, my lawyer advised me to proceed with extreme caution. If you attend therapy, understand it can be subpoenaed depending on the state and the circumstances, she said. And if you don't attend, it could be framed as unwillingness. So you need to balance perception with safety. Perception. Again. So I agreed to one session, with the condition that we begin by clarifying confidentiality, record keeping, and that neither of us had a prior relationship with a therapist. Emily agreed. Sort of. She sent back, "Fina, but I'm not doing your paranoia ritual." The new therapist, Dr. Patel, seemed more straightforward. Less fountain, more clipboard. She asked why we were there. Emily spoke first again. This time, her story had evolved. Now, it wasn't just that I was checked out. Now, I was escalating. Now, I was unpredictable. Now, I was turning everything into legal warfare. I sat there listening, feeling like I was watching Emily build a sculpture out of my boundaries. When Dr. Patel turned to me, I said, "I'm here because I want to co-parent peacefully and I'm willing to work on our communication. But I'm not willing to participate in therapy where my disclosures are shared outside the room or used as leverage." Emily rolled her eyes. Actually rolled them. Dr. Patel raised a hand. "Let's slow down. Emily, can you respond to Mark's concern?" Emily sighed like she was exhausted by my existence. "He's making it sound like I'm plotting something. I just needed support. He went through my laptop. He's the one violating privacy." Dr. Patel looked at me. "Mark, did you go through a laptop?" I hesitated. Then I said the truth. I saw an email notification. I clicked it. I regret it. But what I saw confirmed that what I'd been worried about, my disclosures being shared, was happening. Dr. Patel's expression stayed neutral, but I could see the shift. The moment where my admission could become the headline. Mark invaded privacy. Emily leaned forward, voice trembling perfectly. "Do you know how unsafe that made me feel?" Unsafe. There it was. Dr. Patel nodded. "Feeling unsafe is serious." I interjected, calm but firm. "Emily, you can feel violated by that, and I understand that. But you also share my private information outside therapy. That's why I became cautious." Emily's voice rose. "I share my experience. With my family. Because you were shutting me out." And Dr. Patel, in the most reasonable voice possible, said, "We might need to address both issues. Mark's breach of privacy and Emily's need for support. Both issues. Equal weight." I sat there and realized that even with a new therapist, I was still the guy on trial. Because the language itself had become a weapon. Unsafe. Escalating. Breach. Support. I tried to redirect. "Dr. Patel, before we go further, can we clarify confidentiality? Specifically, whether notes are kept, whether either of us can request a summary, And what happens if legal issues arise? Emily made an impatient noise. Dr. Patel said, we can discuss that. Typically, I keep session notes. They're confidential, but there are exceptions if subpoenaed. Subpoenaed. My stomach dropped. Emily's eyes flicked to mine, and in that flicker, I saw it again. That sense of her being one step ahead. After the session, Emily texted me. See, you're making everything about control. I didn't reply. After a week of rapid-fire messages that kept trying to pull me into arguments, I blocked her number and told her, politely, in writing, that child-related communication could go through email only. A month into separation, Emily asked to change the parenting schedule last minute. It was for a family event. She didn't specify what. I'd already planned a weekend with Sophie. Not Disneyland, just a children's museum and pancakes and maybe a movie night. The kind of normal that felt precious now. I asked what the event was and whether Sophie had been told. Emily replied, it's not your business. It's my family. Sophie wants to come. That sentence made my chest tighten. Sophie wants to come. Another pressure point. I responded, I'm happy to consider schedule changes with reasonable notice and details. Please send the event info and we can discuss swapping time. Emily's response was immediate and furious. You don't get to interrogate me. You're punishing Sophie because you're mad at my family. And then, this is the part one can't stop thinking about. She followed it with, if you keep acting like this, it's going to be reflected in court. There it was, out loud. No more implication. No more careful phrasing. Reflected in court. I stared at my phone until the words blurred. I typed back, please communicate about Sophie's schedule respectfully and with details. If you're threatening legal action, direct it through attorneys. Emily didn't reply. Instead, an hour later, I got an email from her lawyer. Emily had gotten one. The email was polite but pointed. It suggested a temporary custody arrangement where Sophie's primary residence remained with Emily, with me having alternate weekends and one midweek dinner. I read it 3 times, feeling like I was falling through air. This was what the stability language had been warming up for. I forwarded it to my attorney, who called me within an hour. Mark, she said, this is exactly why you needed to stop talking freely. Now we respond. And suddenly, I wasn't a husband in a rough patch. I was a father in a custody negotiation. Here's the part nobody tells you. The legal stuff is brutal, but the psychological stuff is worse. The way you start questioning your own memory, your own tone, your own motives. Was I too cold? Was I too suspicious? Did I create this by being emotionally distant for years? Did Emily feel alone enough that she had to recruit her family? Did she choose Dr. Holt because she truly trusted her, and it just got messy? Or was it deliberate from the start? I'd lie awake replaying old fights, looking for the moment where Emily turned from partner into strategist. But people don't flip like that. They slide. They justify. They tell themselves their actions are for the child. They turn fear into righteousness. And righteousness is dangerous because it doesn't feel like malice. It feels like duty. The more Emily framed herself as protecting Sophie, the more I felt like I had to protect Sophie from being used as a shield. But that's a thought you can't say out loud without sounding insane. My attorney suggested mediation, a structured meeting with a neutral mediator focused on a parenting plan. Emily agreed, quickly, too quickly. We sat in a conference room with a mediator who wore reading glasses and spoke in a calm, practiced voice. Emily arrived with a binder. A binder. I arrived with a folder in my notes. But Emily's binder had tabs. Color-coded tabs. The mediator asked us to describe what we wanted. Emily spoke first. Of course. She said Sophie needed one primary home. She said transitions were hard on kids. She said my work schedule was unpredictable. It wasn't. She said she worried about my emotional regulation. She said she didn't want Sophie exposed to conflict. Then she slid a page across the table. A proposed schedule. Alternate weekends. A dinner midweek. The classic dad schedule. I felt my face go hot. No, I said. I want 50-50. Emily's eyes widened as if I demanded custody of the moon. Mark, that's not realistic. Sophie needs consistency. The mediator looked at me. Mark, can you explain why 50-50 is in Sophie's best interest? And I realized how unfair the question was. Emily got to claim stability. I had to prove fatherhood. So I did. I talked about my flexibility at work, the apartment's proximity to Sophie's school, my involvement, my ability to provide routine. I wasn't asking for more time than Emily. I was asking for equal. Emily listened with her chin slightly raised, then said, "But Mark can be erratic." Erratic. Another word for the record. Define erratic, my attorney said. Emily looked at her binder and flipped to a tab. I swear to God, she flipped to a tab. She pulled out printed screenshots of text messages. Messages where I'd asked for things in writing. Messages where I'd said I wouldn't discuss topics outside email. Messages where I'd insisted on details. She presented my boundaries as evidence of hostility. The mediator frowned slightly, and I could see the impression forming. Mark is difficult. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not into rage, but into clarity. This was never about healing the marriage. This was about winning the separation. And therapy had been the rehearsal. After mediation, I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my car. My hands were on the steering wheel, knuckles white. I could feel a panic attack creeping in, the familiar tightening, the tunnel vision. I breathed. In, out, in, out. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "You embarrassed yourself in there." I stared at it, and for the first time in months, I felt real anger. Not fear, not anxiety. Anger. I typed back before I could stop myself. "You've been building a case since therapy. You didn't want help. You wanted ammo." The second I sent it, regret hit, because I knew how it would be used. Emily replied, "This is exactly why I'm scared." I dropped my phone onto the passenger seat like it burned. I sat there shaking and realized even my anger could be converted into a proof. It's been a few months since I ended therapy with Dr. Holt. Emily tells anyone who will listen that I refused help. Her family treats me like I'm unstable. My own friends are split. Some say I'm right to protect myself. Others say I'm making it worse by being so rigid. My lawyer says my boundaries are smart. My heart says my boundaries are lonely. Sophie is adjusting, but she's starting to test the edges, crying at handoffs, clinging to Emily's leg, then clinging to mine like she's trying to hold both worlds together with her small arms. And the thing that keeps me awake at night isn't just losing time with Sophie. It's the idea that my daughter might grow up hearing a version of me that was curated by people who decided what safe looked like. I want to be cooperative. I want to be kind. I want to be the bigger person. But I also don't want to be the idiot who hands over the rope they plan to hang him with. So, Reddit. AITA? For ending therapy, when I realized it was being used to build a custody narrative, retaining counsel, and refusing to speak to Emily or her family without written boundaries. Edit/info, because I know people will ask. No, I have never been physically abusive. No threats, no violence, no property damage. The laptop/email situation. I saw the notification and clicked. I know it was wrong. I've owned that. But what I saw changed everything. I'm not trying to punish Emily by cutting off her family. I'm trying to stop my private disclosures being shared and reframed. I'm requesting 50% of custody. I'm not trying to take Sophie away from Emily. Edit 2. Emily has since asked to go back to Dr. Holt because she understands our history. I said no. All right. Buckle up, because this is where it stops being a messy separation and turns into something that still makes my hands go cold when I type it. Once Emily hired a lawyer, my life split into two parallel tracks. One, dad life, where I'm trying to keep Sophie's world soft and normal. Two, case life, where I'm learning that reasonable doesn't matter as much as provable. My attorney told me to start treating communication like it could be read aloud in court. Not because we want to fight, she said, but because we want to survive a narrative. So I did. I wrote like I was emailing a stranger I respected. Polite, concise, child-focused. And it was insane how quickly Emily adjusted to that environment, like she'd been waiting for it. She started sending helpful messages that were just too perfect, too sanitized, like she was writing for an audience. "Hi, Mark. Just confirming Sophie's bedtime is 8 o'clock. Please keep things consistent for her emotional well-being." Or, "Sophie mentioned she felt worried when you seemed upset at pickup. Please be mindful of your tone." I'd read those and think, what does seemed upset mean? I was tired. I said hello. I buckled her seatbelt, but I knew better than to argue about vibes. Arguing about vibes is how you end up looking defensive. So I'd reply, thanks. Bedtime at 8 o'clock is fine. If Sophie ever seems worried, I'm happy to coordinate strategies to support her. Translation, I'm not taking the bait, but I'm leaving a record that I care. I became the king of bland kindness. It didn't make me feel like a good person. It made me feel like I was disappearing. About a month after mediation, Dr. Holt emailed me directly. Not a voicemail this time. An email that looked official. Subject line, concern for Sophie/recommendation. She wrote, very warmly, that given the escalation of conflict, she recommended we return to sessions for the sake of the child and offered to provide co-parenting guidance. She also suggested Emily and I sign releases so she could coordinate care with any other providers involved. Sign releases. Coordinate care. In any other universe, that might sound responsible. In my universe, it sounded like handing her a megaphone. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked, can she do that? My lawyer wrote back, she can ask. Do not sign anything. Then she added one sentence that made my stomach drop. This reads like someone preparing to become a witness. That night, I searched Dr. Holt's name online for the first time in weeks. I'm embarrassed it took that long, but part of me still wanted to believe professionalism meant something, and that checking would make me look paranoid. I don't know why I hadn't done a deeper dive earlier. Denial? The belief that professionalism meant something? I found her website again. Same pastel, same calming fonts. Then I found a community newsletter, one of those local PDFs that list charity events and board members and community leaders. And there it was. Karen Holt, PhD, Treasurer, Family Enrichment Council. The Family Enrichment Council that Emily's mother had been fundraising for since forever. Then I found a photo gallery from a fundraiser dinner. And there was Dr. Holt, standing next to Emily's parents, smiling, arm around Emily's mom like they were sisters. I sat back in my chair and just stared, because this wasn't our families know each other. This was there in each other's lives. I sent it to my lawyer. She replied almost immediately. Save everything. This is a conflict of interest problem. A week later, Emily's lawyer requested a custody evaluation. If you've never been through that, let me translate. A stranger with professional authority interviews both parents, observes the child, reviews records, and then writes a report that can influence custody decisions. I was told to treat it like a job interview where the job is being believed. I tried to approach it calmly. I told myself, I'm a decent father. I am stable. I'm not doing anything wrong. The truth will show. Then Emily sent me a message. I hope you'll be honest with the evaluator about your anxiety. I stared at it. Not, I hope the process goes smoothly. Not, this is stressful for both of us. Just a gentle little pin pushed into the bruise. I replied, I plan to be honest and child-focused. My lawyer told me to respond like that every time. Acknowledge, neutral, move on. But inside I was screaming, because I could see the outline of the story Emily wanted. Mark is anxious. Mark is reactive. Mark is guarded and refuses to communicate. Emily is stable and consistent. Sophie needs stability. Therefore, Sophie belongs primarily with Emily. And the cruelest part, most of those bullet points were built from my honesty. From the things I'd admitted in therapy because I thought vulnerability was the path to closeness. The custody evaluator, let's call her Ms. Reeves, was professional and neutral on the surface. Middle-aged, calm voice, minimal reaction. The kind of person who could listen to you confess a crime and just nod and write it down. She met with me first. She asked about my childhood, my work, my parenting routine, my relationship with Emily. Then she asked, tell me about your mental health. My throat tightened. I have anxiety, I said. It's managed. I've never been hospitalized. I work full-time. I parent. How is it managed, she asked. Exercise. Sleep. I've done therapy, I said carefully. With whom? She asked. I paused. A couples therapist we saw briefly. And why did it stop, she asked. I kept my voice steady, because there were boundary concerns. I wasn't comfortable continuing with a therapist who had a close relationship with my wife's family and where private disclosures appear to be shared outside the room. Ms. Reeves's pen stopped. Not dramatically, just stopped. Then she said, "Do you have proof of that relationship?" "I have photos and community board listings," I said. "And I have communication suggesting therapy sessions were being summarized for family members." She nodded once and wrote something down. Then she asked, "How did you become aware of those communications?" And there it was, the trapdoor. Because if I say I clicked an email, it becomes Mark violated privacy. If I say I don't want to answer, it becomes Mark is evasive. So I said the truth, but with context. I saw a notification on a shared device and clicked it. I regret that, but it confirmed that my disclosures were being circulated, and it changed how safe therapy felt. Ms. Reeves wrote more. Her face remained neutral. Then she asked, "Do you believe Emily is trying to alienate Sophie from you?" I felt my heart hammer. This is the kind of question where any answer can be twisted. If I say yes, I sound paranoid. If I say no, I sound naive. So I said, "I believe Emily is under a lot of stress and is influenced heavily by her family. I'm concerned about language being used around Sophie that paints me as unsafe or unstable." Ms. Reeves nodded again, and then she asked the question that made my blood run cold. "Has any therapist expressed concerns about your fitness as a parent?" "Histoire de hair." "Not directly," I said slowly, "but there were references to stability and harm that sounded like custody language." Ms. Reeves's eyes lifted briefly. "Which therapist?" And I said, "Dr. Karen Holt." She wrote it down. Then she said, "Okay, just okay." But that okay landed like a stone. The evaluator observed me with Sophie in my apartment first. Sophie was happy. We played. We read. We did a puzzle. She showed Ms. Reeves her stuffed animals and made up a story about a unicorn who needed 2 castles. I felt like crying. Not because it was sad, but because it was wise. Then Ms. Reeves observed Emily with Sophie at the old house. Afterward, Sophie told me something that made my stomach flip. "Mommy told me to show Ms. Reeves my room," she said casually, like it was nothing. "That's nice," I said, careful. "And Mommy said I should tell her I like sleeping at Mommy's house, because it's calm," Sophie added. I froze. I didn't react visibly. I didn't want Sophie to feel like she'd done something wrong. But inside, I felt the floor tilt. That was coaching. That was shaping testimony. Softly, plausibly deniable, but still shaping. I asked gently, "Did Mommy tell you what to say?" Sophie shrugged. She said it's important. Then she ran off to get a snack. I stood there in my kitchen and realized Emily wasn't just writing for court. She was rehearsing with our child. 2 days later, my lawyer called me. "Mark," she said, "you're not going to like this." My stomach dropped. "What?" Emily's lawyer listed Dr. Holt as a potential witness. I actually laughed just once because it was so absurd it was almost funny. Almost. "A witness," I repeated. "Yes," my lawyer said. "Not officially subpoenaed yet, but listed." I sat down hard on my couch. She was our couple's therapist. "Exactly," my lawyer replied. "And if she testifies, we'll challenge it." I felt like my entire body was buzzing. "Can she testify about what I said?" "Depends," my lawyer said. "But even the attempt is damaging. It suggests credibility. It suggests a professional concern. A professional concern built on therapy sessions I attended in good faith." I wanted to throw up. This is the moment where the mask slid. Emily and I were to pick up exchange. Public place. A parking lot near a coffee shop. We'd agreed to do exchanges in public to keep things calm. Sophie ran to me, hugged my leg, and showed me a drawing she'd made. Emily stood by her car, arms crossed, looking like she was bracing for something. I buckled Sophie into my car, then turned back to Emily and said, evenly, "Sophie mentioned you told her to say your house is calm. Please don't coach her." Emily's eyes widened. "I did not coach her," she snapped. "Sophie told me," I said. Emily stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "You're paranoid. That's why Dr. Holt was worried." My stomach dropped. Worried about what? Emily's mouth tightened. She hesitated just long enough that I could see she hadn't meant to say that part out loud. Then she said, your anxiety makes you unpredictable." My heart pounded. "She said that to you?" Emily rolled her eyes like I was exhausting. "She said it in session." "In session," I repeated. "And you repeated it to your family." Emily's jaw clenched. You're doing the thing where you twist everything. And then she said the sentence I will never forget. Mark, she's known my mom for 20 years. She's not going to lie for you. Not going to lie for you. As if the default assumption was that lying for Emily was on the table. I just stared at her. Emily realized what she'd said. You could see it. Her eyes flicked away, her posture shifted, her tone softened. I didn't mean, she started, but it was too late. The slip was out in the open. I took out my phone, not to record, just to check the time so I could ground myself in something real. Emily saw the phone, and her face changed instantly. Are you recording me? No, I said. I'm leaving. She stepped closer, voice trembling, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. This is what I mean. You're scaring me. I froze. And I understood in that second how easy it is to manufacture a scene. How one sentence, spoken loudly in public, can become an allegation. I lowered my voice even more. I'm not doing this. Please step back. Emily looked at me with wet eyes, the perfect expression of distress, and I realized with horror that she could say anything she wanted right now, and people would believe the crying woman. I got in my car and drove away with Sophie in the back seat humming to herself, unaware that her parents' marriage had turned into live theater for strangers. That night, Emily emailed me. You intimidated me at Exchange today. I felt unsafe. My hands shook as I forwarded it to my lawyer. My lawyer called me and said, Mark, from now on, bring a neutral third party to exchanges or use a supervised exchange location. I stared at the wall. This is insane. It's not insane, she said. It's strategy, and you need to stop expecting fairness from someone who is playing to win. I didn't sleep. I kept hearing Emily's voice. She's known my mom for 20 years. I kept thinking about how I'd walked into therapy like a husband and walked out like a defendant. A week later, the custody evaluator sent preliminary notes to both attorneys, not the final report yet, but enough that we knew what themes were forming. My lawyer's voice sounded cautiously hopeful when she called. She noted concerns about third-party influence and boundary issues with the therapist, she said. She specifically flagged Dr. Holt's connection to Emily's family. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then my lawyer added, and Emily is furious. No surprise there. 2 days later, Emily texted me from a new number because I blocked her for harassment, according to her. Her message was short. You ruined everything. Dr. Holt is livid. I stared at the screen. Not I'm hurt. Not I'm scared. Not I'm worried about Sophie. Dr. Holt is livid. That's when something in me finally settled into certainty. A therapist should not be emotionally invested in a custody outcome. A therapist should not be livid because one parent doesn't comply. That's not therapy. That's allegiance. We're waiting on the evaluator's final report. Court date is scheduled. My lawyer is preparing a motion to exclude Dr. Holt's testimony based on conflict and ethics. Emily is telling people I'm weaponizing the system. Her family is telling people I'm unstable. I'm living in a world where I have to prove I'm normal while being treated like I'm not. And Sophie is still just a kid who wants a unicorn to have 2 castles. So yeah, that's the continuation. The final custody evaluation report landed like a meteor. Not because it was explosive in tone. Ms. Reeves wrote like she was documenting weather. Dry, observational, clinical, but because it turned my life into bullet points. My attorney emailed me. Report received. Call me before you read it. I didn't listen. Of course I didn't. I opened it the second it hit my inbox because I'm human and I was dying to know whether the universe was about to confirm Emily's narrative or mine. The report started with background, marriage history, separation timeline, basic childcare logistics. Then it moved into observations and impressions. I skimmed for my name like a man scanning a medical test result. Mark appears attentive, patient, and child-focused during observed interaction. Child displays comfort and affection with Mark. Interaction is warm and age-appropriate. I felt my chest loosen a fraction. Then, Mark reports history of anxiety. Presentation during evaluation appears organized and regulated. Reports use of coping strategies. No indications of impairment observed. I stared at that line for a long time. No indications of impairment observed. I didn't realize how deeply I'd feared a stranger labeling me unstable until I saw that sentence and felt my eyes sting. Then the report moved to Emily. Emily appears structured and organized. Child's environment at Emily's residence is stable and consistent. Fair. But then, evaluator notes repeated references by Emily and maternal family to safety and stability when discussing Mark without specific examples of harm or danger beyond general conflict and Mark's reported anxiety. I exhaled so hard my hands tingled. And then came the section that made me actually put the report down and walk around my apartment like I'd been hit by a wave. Evaluator notes boundary concerns related to prior couples therapist, Dr. Karen Holt, due to social/professional relationship with maternal family. Evaluator considers this a potential conflict of interest. It wasn't Mark's paranoia. It wasn't Mark's avoidance. It was in a professional report. In writing. On record. The report didn't outright accuse Dr. Holt of wrongdoing, but did the thing Emily couldn't control. It named the connection and called a problem. Then Ms. Reeves addressed the coaching issue. Child reported being encouraged to emphasize one home as calm. Evaluator recommends both parents refrain from discussing custody-related themes with child or encouraging statements that may influence child's perceptions. I read that sentence about 10 times. Encouraged to emphasize. Again, not Mark is imagining things. Not Mark is twisting. Not Emily is just supporting. It was documented. Finally, the recommendation. I braced myself for the classic primary home with mom. Instead, I read, recommendation, shared legal custody, substantially equal parenting time, structured schedule, with emphasis on low conflict exchanges and written communication. Substantially equal. My throat closed. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall while my brain tried to catch up with my body. The report wasn't saying Emily was a monster. It wasn't saying I was perfect. It was saying what I'd been trying to say all along. I am not a dangerous parent. This is not a dad gets weekend situation. And the therapist situation was a legitimate boundary issue. When my lawyer called, she sounded like she'd been holding in a smile. This is good, she said. Is it good? I asked, like a man who's been lied to by reality too many times. It's not a guarantee, she said, but it's strong, and it directly undermines their unsafe narrative. Then she added, Emily's attorney is going to try to discredit it. Of course they were. After the report, Emily did something that sounds sweet if you don't know the context. She asked to meet. In person. Just us. She emailed, we need to stop spending money on lawyers. Let's talk like adults and figure this out ourselves. If you've been following along, you know why my stomach flipped. A private meeting would give her two things. 1, the chance to provoke me and document my reaction. 2, the chance to later claim the conversation went differently. So I replied, I'm open to resolving matters through mediation or attorney communication. I'm not comfortable meeting alone at this time. Emily responded within minutes. So you're refusing again. You'd rather fight than co-parent. I didn't engage. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then Emily tried a different angle, the soft angle. She sent a photo of Sophie sleeping with a stuffed animal, captioned, she misses her family together. I stared at it until my vision blurred. This is the kind of thing that wrecks you. Because it's true, Sophie probably does miss it. And seeing your child used as an emotional lever makes you feel like the cruelest person alive for not folding. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to respond without bleeding emotion into the record. That night, Sophie came to my apartment, and during bedtime she asked, Are you and Mommy mad forever? My throat burned. No, I said. Mommy and Daddy are trying to figure out the best way to be a team for you. Will you stop being weird? She asked, dead serious. I almost laughed. Weird. You talk like my teacher now, she said. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm trying to be clear. Sophie yawned. I like when you just talk normal. And there it was. The cost. Not just financial. Not just emotional. The cost was that my daughter felt me filtering myself. I lay awake that night thinking, what happens when safe communication becomes no personality? The court hearing was on a Tuesday morning. The building smelled like old paper and metal detectors. I wore a suit that suddenly felt like a costume. Emily wore a soft sweater and minimal makeup, like she was auditioning for Concerned Mother. We sat on opposite sides, and I swear to God, her mother was in the gallery. Her mother. I looked at Emily like, really? Emily didn't look back. The judge was brisk, tired, not unkind, but clearly not in the mood for drama. Our attorneys presented positions. My lawyer leaned heavily on the evaluator's report. Substantially equal parenting time, written communication, low conflict exchanges. Emily's lawyer did something I'll never forget. He said, "Your Honor, we have concerns about the father's emotional stability and anxiety, as reflected in prior therapeutic sessions." My stomach dropped. My lawyer stood immediately. Objection. Confidential, therapeutic content. Emily's lawyer smiled like he expected that. "We're not introducing content directly, Your Honor. We're introducing the therapist's professional impressions." Professional impressions. The judge looked mildly irritated. "Is the therapist here?" "No," Emily's lawyer said. "But we have notes." "Notes?" My lawyer's head snapped toward him. "What notes?" Emily's lawyer held up a packet like it was holy scripture. Therapy summaries. And in that moment, I realized the worst-case scenario wasn't paranoia. It was real. Somehow, couples therapy had produced summaries that were now being waved around in court like a weapon. My lawyer asked for a sidebar. The judge agreed. I sat at the table while my attorney and Emily's attorney spoke in lowered voices. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough phrases to make my skin crawl. Conflict of interest. No release signed. Ethics complaint. Inadmissible. The judge's expression tightened. She looked at Emily's attorney and said, clearly, "You do not introduce therapy records without proper foundation and without addressing privilege." Emily's attorney tried again. "Your Honor, the mother is simply concerned about." The judge cut him off. The evaluator addressed anxiety and observed no impairment. "You want to litigate mental health, you do it properly." I exhaled so hard it felt like my ribs moved. Then the judge asked, "Who is the therapist?" Emily's attorney said, "Dr. Karen Holt." My lawyer said, "Your Honor, there is a documented social and professional relationship between Dr. Holt and the mother's family." The judge's eyebrows lifted. My lawyer handed up printed pages, the board listing, the fundraiser photo. Emily's attorney tried to object. The judge waved him off. She looked at the pages, then looked up and said, "Why was this therapist selected?" Emily's attorney said, "The parties agreed." The judge's eyes flicked to me, then to Emily. In that one glance, I felt like she understood what agreed can mean in a marriage, how consent can be manufactured by pressure. The judge set the pages down and said, "This is at minimum a concern. Any attempt to use this therapist's impressions in this matter will require an evidentiary hearing." Then she said the sentence that made me almost collapse with relief. "Today, we are not using therapy to decide custody." Emily's attorney's jaw tightened. Emily's face remained composed, but I saw the flash of anger in her eyes. For the first time, it felt like the room wasn't automatically on her side. After the hearing, my lawyer filed a motion to exclude Dr. Holt's testimony and any therapy-related summaries, citing conflict of interest, privilege issues, and the evaluator's documented boundary concerns. Emily's lawyer responded with a lot of words that boiled down to, "Mark is manipulating the system to silence Emily." The judge scheduled a separate evidentiary hearing about the therapist issue. And that's when something weird happened. Emily stopped mentioning Dr. Holt. Like completely. A woman who had insisted on that therapist suddenly acted like Dr. Holt didn't exist. Emily's emails shifted from "therapy is necessary" to "I'm focusing on co-parenting." Her family stopped texting me. Not that they could because they were blocked, but still, the pressure eased. It was like the moment the conflict became visible to an authority figure, they retreated. That alone told me I wasn't crazy. The day of the therapist hearing, Dr. Holt actually showed up. Seeing her in a courthouse was surreal. She didn't look like healing. She looked like someone prepared for a deposition. Professional, crisp, controlled. Emily sat straighter when Dr. Holt entered, like reinforcements had arrived. The judge swore her in. My lawyer asked the first question. "Dr. Holt, Do you have a social or professional relationship with Emily's mother? Dr. Holt smiled faintly. I know her through the community. Through the Family Enrichment Council, my lawyer asked. Dr. Holt hesitated. Yes. And you serve on a board with her? My lawyer asked. Dr. Holt shifted in her chair. Yes. And attended multiple social events together? My lawyer continued. Dr. Holt's smile tightened. Community events? Yes. My lawyer held up the fundraiser photo. Is this you with Emily's mother? Dr. Holt glanced at it. Yes. Then my lawyer asked, did you disclose this relationship to Mark before or at the outset of couples therapy? Dr. Holt looked toward Emily for the briefest moment. Then she said, I did not believe it was clinically relevant. My lawyer nodded slowly. You did not believe it was relevant that you had a long-standing relationship with one party's family while providing couples therapy to that party and her spouse. Dr. Holt's cheeks colored slightly. In small communities, this is common. The judge's face didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. Then my lawyer went for the jugular. Did you provide any session summaries or impressions to Emily or her family for purposes of custody or documentation? Dr. Holt's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Emily exhaled like she'd been vindicated. My lawyer didn't react. She simply asked, did you ever discuss with Emily the importance of documentation? Dr. Holt's eyes flicked again, microsecond, but I saw it. I may have discussed that keeping track of patterns can be helpful in therapy. My lawyer said, patterns of what? Dr. Holt's voice stayed smooth. Communication patterns. Emotional regulation. Then my lawyer pulled out the email thread. Not the entire thing. Just the relevant excerpt, sanitized to avoid revealing private content, but enough to show the line. Dr. Holt agrees that documentation matters. My lawyer asked, is this your statement, relayed through Emily? Dr. Holt's composure cracked for a second. I cannot verify what Emily told her sister. My lawyer said, understood. Then I'll ask differently. Did you ever communicate, directly or indirectly, that Mark's anxiety could impact custody? Dr. Holt looked straight ahead. I do not provide legal advice. My lawyer paused. That wasn't my question. The judge leaned forward slightly. Dr. Holt swallowed. I may have said that untreated mental health issues can be relevant in family systems. Relevant to custody? My lawyer asked. Dr. Holt hesitated. It can be a factor in parenting. Emily's attorney jumped up. Objection, speculation. The judge held up a hand. Overruled. She can answer what she said. Dr. Holt's face went very still. And then my lawyer asked the question that ended it. Dr. Holt, did you consider that your relationship with Emily's family could affect Mark's willingness to be candid in therapy? Dr. Holt opened her mouth, closed it, then said, in hindsight, I can see how Mark might feel uncomfortable. In hindsight, my lawyer said, and did you take any steps to protect Mark's confidentiality from disclosure outside therapy? Dr. Holt replied, confidentiality is between therapists and clients. Between therapists and clients, my lawyer repeated. Then why did Emily's family become aware of Mark's private disclosures? Dr. Holt said, I did not disclose them. My lawyer nodded calmly. But you were aware that Emily was sharing them. Dr. Holt stiffened. I can't control what clients share. No, my lawyer said. But you can set boundaries. You can address it. You can clarify what is harmful. Did you? Dr. Holt's answer was quiet. I encouraged Emily to seek support. The judge exhaled through her nose. One of those tiny sounds people make when they're trying not to show irritation. The judge ruled at the end of the hearing that Dr. Holt's testimony would carry limited weight due to conflict concerns and that therapy summaries would not be admitted as evidence without proper release and privilege waiver. Translation: Dr. Holt was radioactive. I walked out of the courthouse and sat on a bench outside and just stared at the sky like I'd survived a storm. You might think that after a judge basically side-eyed the therapist situation, Emily would back off. Nope. She pivoted. Emily stopped using therapy as the weapon and started using tone and cooperation. Every message from her became a trap built out of politeness. Just checking in. Are you available to take Sophie Friday? If not, I'll make arrangements. If I said yes, great, she looked accommodating. If I said no, she'd say I was unavailable. If I asked for clarity, She'd accuse me of interrogating. She also began doing something that felt small, but was huge. She started scheduling things on my days. Not huge things, little things. Playdates, birthday parties, family dinners. And then she'd tell Sophie about them first. So Sophie would arrive at my place saying, "Mommy said I'm going to Ella's party on Saturday." And I'd have to decide, do I say no and become the bad guy? Or do I give up my time and reinforce that Emily controls the calendar? I tried to compromise, but the pattern was clear. She was training Sophie to see my time as flexible and Emily's as fixed. It was subtle, and it was exhausting. This happened during a call with our attorneys present, conference call recorded by the attorneys. Emily was pushing again for primary residence, even after the evaluator recommended substantially equal time. My attorney asked, "Emily, what specific concerns do you have about Mark having equal time?" Emily paused, then said, "He's unpredictable." My attorney said, "Can you provide concrete examples of behavior that compromises Sophie's safety or well-being?" Emily hesitated. Then she said, "It's not one thing. It's his vibe. I swear to God. His vibe." There was a silence, so long I could hear someone breathe. My attorney said, very calmly, "Courts do not decide custody based on vibes." Emily snapped, "You're minimizing. This is why women don't get believed." My attorney replied, "Emily, we are asking for specifics." Emily's lawyer interrupted quickly, trying to move on. But I sat there with my phone pressed to my ear thinking, she has built a war out of feelings and called it facts. Ultimately, because of the evaluator's report and the court's reluctance to entertain therapy as evidence, we landed on a temporary order that looked pretty close to equal time. A structured schedule, written communication, public exchanges. Emily didn't lose. I didn't win. But Sophie got 2 active parents in her week, not 1 parent and a visitor. And yet, I still feel guilty, because I know I'm not blameless in the marriage. I did withdraw. I did shut down. I did let Emily carry too much mental load sometimes. But I also know this. When someone takes your vulnerability and turns it into a legal strategy, something breaks that doesn't unbreak. I don't trust Emily anymore. Not in the way marriage requires. And I don't know if I ever will. Sometimes Sophie will be half asleep in my arms, and she'll whisper, "You're a good daddy." And I'll smile and say, "I love you, kiddo." And then, after she's asleep, I'll sit in the dark and think about how close I came to being written out of her life by a narrative that started on a couch with a fountain gurgling in the corner. So, AITA, Emily says I'm heartless for making everything legal. Her family says I'm controlling and paranoid. A few mutual friends think I overreacted and should have trusted the process. But the process, at least the one Emily insisted on, wasn't neutral. It wasn't safe. It was a pipeline from my mouth to their dinner table to a custody strategy. So, AITA 4, walking out of therapy, hiring a lawyer, insisting on written boundaries, and treating my own marriage like it might end in court. Because it did. By the time we got to the permanent order hearing, I'd learned something I hate admitting. You don't win custody. You survive it. The court calendar moved at the speed of sludge. Weeks stretched into months, and every week was a test of my ability to act like a normal dad while living inside a quiet legal siege. Sophie adjusted in the way kids do, fast on the outside, slower on the inside. She learned which toothbrush lived where. She learned that both houses had rules and both houses had love. She learned to pack her unicorn in a backpack like it was a passport. But she also started doing little things that made my throat tighten. She'd ask, "Do you want me to tell Mommy you're not mad?" She'd check my face at pickup like she was scanning for weather. She'd say it's okay too quickly, like she was trying to make the adults feel better. Kids don't choose sides on purpose. They choose safety. They become diplomats because no one taught them they didn't have to. So I changed my goal. At first, my goal was fairness. 50-50, equal time, no therapist weaponizing my vulnerability. Then my goal became simpler. Sophie should never feel like she has to manage my emotions, which is hard because I was furious. Not the explosive kind of fury, the cold kind. The kind that shows up as exhaustion and a jaw that's always tight. The kind that makes you replay conversations in the shower whispering the words you wish you'd said. I kept it contained. I did the bland, polite emails. I did the public exchanges. I did the child-focused language until it felt like I'd lost my personality. But I also started therapy again, actual therapy, for me, with someone neutral who had never met my wife's mother at a charity gala. And in those sessions, I said something I'd been afraid to admit. I think I'm grieving my marriage like it died, but Emily is still alive. Because that was the weirdest part. Divorce isn't like a breakup where you can go no contact and heal. When you have a child, you're tethered forever. You don't just lose the person, you lose the version of them you thought existed. And you have to see the new version regularly. Emily kept trying to push primary residence, even after the evaluator. Her attorney framed it as minimizing transitions and reducing conflict. My attorney pushed back with the evaluator's recommendation and a stack of documentation showing consistent involvement. School pickups, doctor visits, homework, bedtime, extracurriculars. Emily's case had a problem now. It still relied on implication. Unpredictable, unsafe, erratic, vibe. Those words sound convincing until someone asks for one concrete example. And in court, I feel isn't I can prove. At the pre-hearing conference, the judge, same brisk, tired judge, asked a simple question. What is the basis for limiting the father to alternate weekends? Emily's lawyer started to speak. The judge cut him off. I'm asking for evidence, not adjectives. Emily's lawyer tried to pivot to therapy again, carefully. The mother has concerns based on professional guidance. The judge raised her hand, palm out. We addressed the therapist issue. We're not doing that again. Emily's lawyer tried another angle. The father can be difficult to communicate with. My attorney stood. Written communication has reduced conflict. The father has remained respectful and responsive. We have records. The judge looked at our exchanges briefly, like scanning an invoice, and said something that made my shoulders drop for the first time in months. I'm not seeing a basis to restrict equal time. Emily's face stayed composed, but her mouth tightened so hard it looked painful. The judge ordered the parties to attempt one final mediation, with the evaluator's recommendation as the starting point. Translation: stop wasting my time. Work it out. The final mediation felt different. Emily showed up without her binder. That sounds small, but it wasn't. The binder had been armor, a symbol that she was prepared, righteous, organized. Without it, she looked human, tired, angry, cornered. The mediator laid out the evaluator's recommendation. Substantially equal time, structured schedule, written communication, low conflict exchanges, no coaching the child. Emily's attorney whispered to her a lot. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the table. Then Emily said, I just don't understand why Mark is doing this. The mediator asked, doing what? Emily's voice cracked, but it didn't sound like performance this time. It sounded like genuine disbelief, acting like I'm his enemy. I swallowed hard, because part of me wanted to laugh, and part of me wanted to cry. I said, carefully, I didn't start acting this way until I realized my vulnerability was being used against me. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to protect myself and protect Sophie from being pulled into adult conflict. Emily shook her head. You're rewriting history. The mediator held up a hand. We're not here to decide who's right. We're here to create a plan for the child. Then she asked Emily directly, do you believe Mark loves Sophie? Emily hesitated. That hesitation lasted too long. Finally, she said quietly, yes. Do you believe he is capable of meeting Sophie's needs during his time? The mediator asked. Emily's jaw clenched. He can. The mediator nodded. Then equal time is reasonable. Emily's eyes filled. She wiped them quickly, almost angry at herself for having them. And then she said something I didn't expect, something that made my stomach twist with a different kind of grief. I thought therapy would make him admit he was the problem. Silence. Even her attorney looked uncomfortable. The mediator said gently, therapy isn't supposed to be a verdict. Emily's voice dropped. It was supposed to make him understand. To finally listen. Because this was the first time I'd heard the truth without the packaging. Not I'm scared. Not I'm unsafe. Not stability. Just, I wanted you to admit I was right. And in that moment, I saw the whole thing clearly, not as a conspiracy movie, but as a very human disaster. Emily felt powerless in our marriage. So she sought power. She found it in language, in allies, in a therapist she trusted. Maybe too much. And once she had it, she didn't want to let it go. That didn't excuse what she did, but explained how she justified it. The mediation ended with an agreement. True 50-50 parenting time on a structured schedule. Shared legal custody. All communication through a co-parenting app, court-approved, time-stamped. Exchanges at a neutral public location or school. No discussing court/therapy/adult conflict with Sophie, explicit clause. No third-party interference, a polite way of saying, your family stays out of it. Emily signed. I signed. The mediator smiled like we'd achieved peace. It wasn't peace. It was a ceasefire with paperwork. The judge reviewed the agreement like she was reading a menu. Then she looked up and said, "This aligns with the evaluator's recommendations. I'm entering it as the permanent order." Permanent. That word landed heavy. Not because I want to go back. I didn't. But because permanence means you stop hoping for a magical undo. You stop fantasizing that someone will suddenly apologize and everything will return to the before. Permanent is the moment you accept. This is the new world. The judge addressed us directly. Your daughter needs you both. She does not need to be the messenger, the therapist, or the referee. Do not put her in the middle. Do we understand? Emily said yes. I said yes. And for the first time in a long time, I believed the room. A week after the order, Emily asked to talk in person. She suggested a coffee shop. I agreed because now we had boundaries and an order and the war had cooled. We sat across from each other in public, two people who used to share a bed, now separated by lattes and a legal document. Emily stared at her cup for a long time before she spoke. "You really think I tried to take Sophie from you?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation disguised as sadness. I answered honestly. I think you were willing to let that happen if it meant you felt safe and in control. Emily flinched. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she whispered. I stared at her and felt something inside me loosen. Not forgiveness, but clarity. "You didn't have to be trying to hurt me for it to hurt," I said. "You just had to decide my pain was acceptable collateral." Emily's eyes filled again. "I was drowning." "I know," I said. "And instead of grabbing my hand, you grab a weapon." That was the first time I saw Emily look truly ashamed. Not angry. Not defensive. Ashamed. She swallowed. "Dr. Holt thinks you're vindictive." I almost laughed. I didn't. I said, "Dr. Holt shouldn't think anything about custody." Emily's face tightened. "She's not a bad person." I leaned forward slightly. "Emily, listen to me. A couples therapist who is a family friend cannot be neutral. A therapist who becomes part of a custody strategy is not practicing therapy. I don't care how kind she is at fundraisers." Emily's eyes flashed. "So what? You're going to ruin her career now." There was the loyalty. I said quietly, "I'm not trying to ruin anyone, but I'm not going to pretend it was okay." Emily stared at me. "My mom said you filed a complaint." I didn't deny it. Because yes, I did. Not out of revenge. Out of fear that she'd do this to someone else. "I did," I said. Emily's breath hitched. "How could you?" I looked at her and felt the final thread snap. Not a dramatic snap, just the quiet severing of a bond that had already been fraying for months. "How could I?" I repeated softly. "Emily, you try to bring her therapy notes into court." Emily's mouth opened, then closed. I continued, voice calm but firm. "You don't get to pretend ethics matter only when they protect you." Emily's face hardened. "You're cold." "No," I said. "I'm done being naive." We sat in silence. Then Emily said, in a voice so small it almost didn't sound like her, "I miss you. Sometimes." It hit me like a punch. Because I missed her too. Not the strategist. Not the version who used unsafe like a knife. I missed the old Emily. The one who laughed in the kitchen. The one who used to lean her head on my shoulder and sigh like I was home. But missing someone doesn't mean you could trust them. "I miss what we were," I said. "But I don't know how to be married to someone I have to document." Emily swallowed hard. "So that's it." "That's it," I said. "I'll be careful here, because I'm not trying to dox anyone or play hero. I'm just telling you what happened. After the therapist hearing, and after my attorney filed the motion, and after I submitted the ethics complaint with documentation of the relationship and the attempt to use summaries in court, the world got quiet. Dr. Holt didn't contact me again. Emily stopped mentioning her. Then one day, months later, I got a notification through the co-parenting app. Emily had attached a new document for Sophie's school paperwork. The file name was something like medical release _ Sophie. I opened it to make sure it was legit. And there was a signature line with Dr. Holt's name, crossed out, replaced with a different provider. That's when I understood. Whether Dr. Holt faced consequences or not, she was no longer in their inner circle the way she'd been. At minimum, she had become inconvenient. And the thing that surprised me most wasn't satisfaction. It was sadness. Because if someone can build a career around healing and still get pulled into this kind of mess, what does that say about the systems we trust? The permanent order did one thing I didn't expect. It lowered the temperature. Not because Emily suddenly became kind, but because the battlefield shrank. The rules became external. The story had less room to grow. The co-parenting app helped. Everything time-stamped, everything visible. No more you said/I said spirals. Emily still tried little power plays at first, scheduling on my days, telling Sophie things before telling me. But when I kept responding the same way, calm, consistent, documented, those plays started failing. And when they fail, people stop doing them. Sophie got lighter. That's the best way I can describe it. She stopped scanning our faces as much. She stopped asking if we were mad forever. She started leaving her unicorn at my house sometimes, like she trusted it would still be there. One night, she crawled into my lap and said, "I like 2 castles." I kissed her forehead. Me too. So, am I the asshole? Here's my honest answer. If you believe marriage means unconditional trust no matter what, then yes, I'm the asshole for lawyering up, setting boundaries, and treating conversations like evidence. But if you believe trust is earned and protected, then no, I'm not the asshole for refusing to hand my vulnerabilities to people who turn them into leverage. I didn't end therapy because I hate accountability. I ended therapy because the room wasn't safe. And when your spouse turns healing into a custody narrative, the most loving thing you can do for your child is stop participating in the charade and start building a stable, enforceable framework. That's what I did. And it cost me my marriage. But it didn't cost me my daughter. Sophie still calls them her 2 castles. And on the hardest nights, that's the only verdict that matters. If you've read this far, I need you to weigh in because I'm still sitting here wondering if I became the thing I was trying to avoid. AITA, was I right to walk away from that therapist and lawyer up immediately? Or did I escalate things by treating my wife like an opponent before she truly became one? Give me your opinion in the comments. And if you've been through something similar, therapy being used as leverage, or a co-parenting narrative forming, tell me what you wish you'd done sooner. If you think this was bad, wait until you hear what happened next. Subscribe for the next story and comment what you would have done in my shoes, because one wrong move can change custody forever.